pressing issue in Syria now. We have a lot of turmoil. Senator John McCain has just come out and is advocating that the U.S. get involved in Syria and helping the rebels with military airstrikes. How do you feel about that, being that you have such a extensive military background?
Well, I'd be hesitant for us to take sides in some of these conflicts, because I think sometimes we look and see Assad, who's definitely a bad guy, and we think that the people fighting him must therefore be good guys, must be Democrats. And in that part of the world, that's really not the way it ends up working out. And I kind of fear that some of those people who are opposing Assad were some of the same people who were fighting against us when we were in Iraq. So I don't have a good enough sense about the opposition to say that we should jump in on their side. And I think that as a general matter, the kind of taking out these dictators and then creating better societies in that part of the world is much more difficult than sometimes we think.
Now, do you think if they were to get involved, the U.S. were to get involved in Syria, you think we may see the same thing that happened in Libya, that you have something like the Muslim Brotherhood come in and it's more of an unruly government than anything?
It's possible, and that's the thing. When we talk about democracies in this part of the world, you can go vote, and that's part of it. But you got to have an appreciation for individual rights and liberty, and it can't just be my mob against your mob. And I kind of feel in Libya that's what you saw. You just saw a couple warring factions, and you'll probably see the same thing in Syria. And so for us to get involved in that, I'm just not sure that that's the wise thing at this point.
Yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we're debating an amendment which would not guard our nation from terrorist infiltration, nor even authorize our armed forces to eliminate ISIS's personnel, equipment, and bases. Instead, the amendment authorizes President Obama to train and equip with U.S. weaponry members of the Syrian Mujahideen, the so-called moderate rebels. The amendment states that the training and equipment can only be provided to vetted rebels. But who are those rebels? It says they can't be affiliated with ISIS, al-Nusra, and al-Qaeda, which is good, but it would allow President Obama to arm other Islamist fighters who do not meet the threshold of being terrorists, including Harak al-Azam fighters from the Muslim Brotherhood, the Syrian Revolutionaries Front, and the Army of the Mujahideen. Now, Mujahideen fighters in Syria are not moderates, nor are they pro-American. They will take our arms and use them as they see fit, most likely to fight Assad in pursuit of installing a Sunni Sharia state in Syria. They cannot be counted on to vindicate our interests, which is why it is a mistake to subcontract out American national security to Islamist fighters. Half measures like this will not suffice. There are no shortcuts when it comes to our national defense. Now, I constantly hear people say that Americans are war-weary, and I disagree with that. I think Americans are willing to do what it takes to defend our people and our nation. I think they are weary of missions launched without a coherent strategy and are sick of seeing engagements that produce inconclusive results rather than clear-cut victory. I think they are weary of a president that consistently proves himself unwilling to do what is necessary to win. And I've heard some colleagues say that arming the Syrian Mujahideen demonstrates strength and resolve. I think it's evidence of a lack of resolve. The president's strategy rests on wishful thinking. It is not sufficient to defeat the Islamic State. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida.
Joining us now is Congressman Ron DeSantis, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He sits also in the Judiciary and Oversight and Government Reform Committees. Congressman, good to have you with us. You have decided not to support the president's call for an attack on Syria. It appears that he has run into as I say, it appears to be utterly unexpected opposition to his call for strikes in both St. Petersburg as well on Capitol Hill. What is the principal reason in your judgment?
Well, I think that there's a couple reasons. You do have some members of his party who just don't like war, period. But then you have a lot of us who are strong on defense, and we believe that we need to defend America's vital interests in the world. But we look at this situation, and we don't see a coherent military objective that's been articulated or a plan to achieve that, much less a plan for what happens after the first strike is landed. And obviously you could see escalation there. And that's all the more troubling given the realities of the Syrian civil war on the ground. I mean, we're coming up on the anniversary of September 11th. It's almost unthinkable that if we were to strike Assad, that we would actually be helping members of al-Qaeda who are fighting the regime. And so the result in Syria is likely to be a regime that's hostile to the United States no matter which side wins. And so in that instance, I think it's good for us to stay out of it.
And your colleagues in the House of Representatives for right now, let's focus on them, the Republican Party. Your House Speaker has already decided that he is for a war against Syria. As the President described it, a limited proportional strike. That's an attack. It is an act of war against a sovereign nation because it would be unilateral at this point. He can find no support anywhere else. The majority leader, Eric Cantor, has already said he supports such an attack. Where does that leave the Republican Party, your colleagues in the caucus?
Well, I think that the leadership has gotten out in front. I do not see the rank and file following in line for a couple reasons. One is the calls and emails that are coming into all of our offices are 95-1 against this strike. And I think a lot of us are weary about the Syrian opposition and do not want to do anything to help enemies of the United States. And so it's a tough road to hoe. And, Lou, when you're looking at this situation, we got to look against the backdrop of what this president has already done. So if you want to look at how the Libyan operation ended up, Libya is a disaster right now. We had 4 Americans massacred in Benghazi. I don't want us to blunder into something in Syria and end up with a similar circumstance on our hand. And you can say that it's going to be limited all you want, but the minute something happens, there could be a response by Assad, there could be a response by Hezbollah or Iran. We don't know, and so you have to be prepared for all of those contingencies. So it's irresponsible to say that there will not be any American boots on the ground because we just don't know what will happen.
Well, actually, that's a flat-out contradiction to say that there won't be boots on. A flat-out contradiction by the Congressional Research Service, a report, in order to secure the 50 chemical weapon and production sites, the estimate by the Pentagon was it would take more than 75,000 troops to neutralize those weapons. This is an administration, as is so often the case. It is not unique to this administration. What it wants to do, for whatever purposes, based on their best assessments, I assume that they have the best intentions. They are painting the picture as brightly as they can to support and favor their desires here to go to war, to attack Syria. Congressman, we forgot to mention one very important thing about you, and I want to fix that right now. Congressman DeSantis is also an officer in the U.S. Naval Reserve. This is a matter of obviously public policy for him as a congressman, and much more as a naval officer. We thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.